Lord Father, well, here we are, Lord. We ask for your presence here, for your blessing, for your spirit of inspiration to attach the importance that you feel is necessary for this particular topic, Lord. Thank you for your intervention on our behalf on this, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Just for the record, I am John Everblest. Today is the 21st of October, 2023. The presentation today is part 2 of Eden, God's magnificent outdoor automatic healthcare system. Part 2 is entitled Stories of Healing Through Outdoor Living. God has embedded our healthcare into nature. When we separate ourselves from nature, we separate ourselves from our health care, which means we leave ourselves wide open to the genocidal weapons formed against us by the enemy of our souls and his organized minions around the globe. We dare not remain without that protection in such a time as this. God is pointing us back to his counteragents. Nature itself is that counteragent. Living, working, and sleeping in nature is how we survive the genocidal war against us. We obey natural law. We embrace God's magnificent outdoor automatic healthcare system. Now, the historical micro stories that follow show how others have lived outdoors and improved their health dramatically as a result, even in the winter. And in some cases, especially in the winter. So consider this presentation a practical introduction to acclimating to outdoor living. It's coming one way or the other. So, all right, story number 1. There's 20 of these little tiny micro stories. Some stories are just 1 or 2 sentences long. All right, first one. This is a fun story. Outdoor living versus artificial living. This is from the Health Question Box, 1920, by Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, page 115. The question was asked, does civilization make men? The answer was, well, Benjamin Franklin once told the following story, which presents the red man's views of college training. Here it is. After the principal business was settled, this is Benjamin Franklin talking, was settled, the commissioners from Virginia acquainted the Indians by a speech that there was at Williamsburg College. Excuse me. Let me start that over. After the principal business was settled, the commissioners from Virginia acquainted the Indians by a speech that there was at Williamsburg College with the fund for educating Indian youth, and that if the 6 nations would send down half a dozen of their young lads to that college, the government would take care that they should be well provided for and instructed in all the learning of the white people. We are convinced, the Indians replied, that you mean to do us good by your proposal, and we thank you heartily. But you, who are wise, must know that different nations have different conceptions of things, and you will therefore not take it amiss if our ideas of this kind of education happen not to be the same with yours. We have had some experience of it. Several of our young people were formerly brought up at the College of the Northern Provinces. They were instructed in all your sciences, but when they came back to us, they were bad runners, ignorant of every means of living in the woods, unable to bear cold or hunger, knew neither how to build a cabin, take a deer, nor kill an enemy, spoke our language imperfectly, were therefore neither fit for hunters, warriors, nor counselors. They were totally good for nothing. We are, however, not the less obliged by your kind offer, though we decline accepting it. And to show our grateful sense of it, if the gentlemen of Virginia will send us a dozen of their sons, we will take great care of their education, instruct them in all we know, and make men of them. Like I say, that was just a fun story with a little bit of a lesson of outdoor living, but it gets more relevant as we go on. All right, number 2. The following story is excerpted from an article entitled Housebound by Mrs. E. Kellogg, John Harvey Kellogg's wife. Page 236 of Good Health Magazine, 1905. In the effort made some years ago to civilize the American Indians, a certain government agent in the Northwest built some comfortable, up-to-date dwellings upon the farms in his jurisdiction, which he succeeded in persuading the Indians to occupy. Not long thereafter, circumstances necessitated his leaving his station for a time, but he left, congratulated himself upon the progress his wards had made toward civilization. Imagine his surprise upon returning to his charge 2 years later to find the Indians reinstated in the wigwams, while the houses he had taken so much pain to provide for them were devoted to the storage of their farming implements. Upon inquiry as to the occasion of such change, he was informed that all who slept in the houses became sick, and some of them spit blood, that's TB. When they returned to their well-aerated wigwams, they regained their health, and naturally they preferred health to houses. Too much house was the Indian chief's naive diagnosis of their difficulty. Too much house may be rightfully credited as the cause of a large share of ills in these days of modern architectural achievements. It is pretty well understood that air and sunshine are among the most efficacious remedial agents in cases of illness. And we're going to find that to be true, repeated over and over throughout these different stories. All right. That which is of so much utility in the restoration of health is of no less value for its preservation. The life-giving, life-sustaining properties of sunlight and fresh air evince the Creator's purposeful provision for the health of his creatures. Without these, no living thing can thrive and maintain resistance to disease. Why, then, spurn these munificent gifts of heaven to immure oneself behind airtight walls of brick and wood and stone, with closed doors and shaded windows, keeping out as much as possible of the vivifying elements? All right, good question. Story number 3, this is from in Ireland. This is from an exhibition called The Irish Village. Bad housing accommodation in Ireland accounted for a good deal. And unfortunately, in some cases, the replacing of hovels with modern cottages made TB worse instead of better, because the occupants knew nothing about ventilation. And the plastered houses were airproof as well as weatherproof, whereas the old, loosely built houses let in fresh air on all sides, while the expired air escaped by the hole which let out the smoke. Okay, the next true story may be similar, maybe somewhat familiar to you. Number 4. This is again from the Health Question Box, 1920, Dr. Kellogg, page 114. The question was asked, is the simple life more or less an experiment? Well, here's the story. The answer is no, says Dr. Kellogg. The principles of the simple life are well grounded in human experience. Hundreds of examples might be cited of men who have prolonged their lives and useful activity far beyond the usual age at which men become senile and incapable by temperate and simple living. A striking example of the influence of a return to the primitive mode of life is afforded by the example of Alexander Selkirk, the original of William Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. In other words, the book Robinson Crusoe was inspired by this true story of Alexander Selkirk. Here's what he says. Selkirk, sailor, was put ashore on the uninhabited island of Juan Fernandez by his captain, with whom he had quarreled, and for 4 years lived in solitude, subsisting upon the natural resources of the island. His whole stock of food, when put ashore, having consisted of food sufficient for 2 meals. At first, he was much depressed by the lack of human companionship. But after a year or two, he came really to enjoy his simple life. The genial climate, the simple out-of-door activities necessary to supply his daily needs, and especially an extraordinary sense of well-being and the joy of living made him quite content with his lot. So that when he was finally accidentally discovered by a ship compelled to land for supplies, he was really more concerned with the effort to assist in relieving the sailor's needs than elated at the prospect of leaving his island home. During the 4 years of natural simple living, his vigor, agility, and endurance had increased to such a degree that he could outrun and capture the swiftest wild goats speeding up the steep mountainsides. Says his biographer, who interviewed him in 1711, soon after his return to England, respecting the effects of the simple life he was compelled to lead, this manner of life became so exquisitely pleasant that he never had a moment heavy upon his hands. His nights were untroubled and his days joyous from the practice of temperance and exercise. The man frequently bewailed his return to the world, which could not, he said, with all its enjoyments, restore to him the tranquility of his solitude. This plain man's story is a memorable example that he is happiest who confines his wants to natural necessities, and he that goes further in his desires increases his wants in proportion to his acquisitions. Or to use his own expression, I am now worth 800 pounds, but shall never be so happy as when I was not worth a farthing. Now, the next true story is rather extreme, but it is also extremely interesting and telling. Get some water here. All right. This is from Sunshine and Open Air by Leonard Hill, 1925. He says the tubercular patients in the Alps has the best opportunities of exposing his skin to sun and air baths. And he or she must learn to do this and give up overclothing and overheating in the sun boxes and stuffy warm rooms indoors at night, which are permitted at many foreign sanitariums. He can gain a lesson from the following letter sent to me from Australia. A lesson taught by the success of the exposure treatment applied to children, such as you see here in this image. Now, here's the letter from that man who worked on a banana farm in Australia. I had read your article on Dr. Rollier's sun cure and had experienced the delight of surf bathing, the pleasure of which I have observed lies quite as much in the exposure of the skin to the sun and wind as to the water. About 2 months and a half ago, it occurred to me that I was in a capital position to get all the pleasure and benefit that might be obtained by sunbathing. He means without clothing. I worked by myself on a banana plantation on the side of a mountain. So I started first working naked to the waist. Then, about a week later, I discarded pants and boots. That means he's going to be grounded, and worked absolutely naked for about a week. Then, being afraid that someone might come on me unawares, and also there being times when I might possibly be seen from an adjacent house, I took an old pair of trousers, cut the legs off at the fork, and have worked in them ever since. I find it very pleasant and enjoyable, and I am sorry to have to put clothes on when I leave my work. The most enjoyable part of it to me is not the sun, but the feeling of the air in motion on my skin. And that, yes, folks, that is a real thing. I've tried it and it's amazing. All right. Though exceptionally strong and healthy, I have all my life been an exceedingly chilly mortal that dreaded the cold. It was indeed mainly owing to that fact that I left England in search of a warmer climate. And for the last few years, this inability to stand the cold has been increasing. Now it is 9 p.m. and a fortnight from midwinter day. I'm sitting here perfectly naked, writing this in a cold, drafty house on a bare wooden chair. And the very same spot where this time last year I could not sit without a cushion on the chair, an extra thick pair of woolen trousers, a thick flannel shirt, a woolen sweater, and a heavy overcoat. And then I'd have to go to bed for warmth a good deal earlier than this. I often had to put on my overcoat in the house at night in the middle of summer. But I now go driving with thin trousers and a thin cotton singlet, unbuttoned, my chest all bare, and nothing else. I work naked some days in a bitter cold wind driving light showers onto me. At times, I take off my abbreviated pants and sit or lie down on the cold, wet ground and enjoy the nice, cool feel of it on my bare skin. Winter has no more terrors for me. I expect in another year to qualify for a trip to the South Pole. And all this is the result of 2.5 months nakedness. Now, this demonstrates the marvelous health-enhancing potential found in the outdoor automatic healthcare agencies of exercise, combined with wind and air and sun and hot and cold upon our bare skin. The ideal here would be your own industry done outdoors, naked, or at least close to it, in absolute privacy. Story number 6. When children after the holidays return to school, epidemics of cold usually begin to run through the community. But in the holidays, they may paddle all day in the sea, bare-legged, exposed to far greater cooling than at school. They may shiver and be blue with cold after bathing, but they do not suffer with colds. The colds begin when the weather confines them in shut-up and artificial warmed schoolrooms and places of assembly. You know that word cold? It occurs to me just this very moment. It's a misnomer. It's misnamed. Colds have nothing to do with cold. It's about shutting some people, sealing ourselves up indoors. Number 7, in 1814, in an epidemic of typhus fever at Paris, some cases were placed in a building in one of the highest and breeziest parts of the city. These cases did infinitely better than those in regular hospitals. Number 8, Since 1854, the sick of the Austrian army have been largely treated during 8 or 9 months in the year in well-ventilated tents in preference to hospitals. The results have been beneficial both as preventive and curative measure. You see in the pattern here? All right, Gettysburg Camp Letterman Hospital during the American Civil War. Typhoid fever cases treated in tents in the field recovered in larger percentages than those treated in the finely arranged city hospitals. Number 10, from 1900 to 1905, the overall mortality of consumptive patients in open-air wards was less than half that of those who received the orthodox indoor treatment of the day. This is just the sort of thing we need to know in order to understand the importance of open-air living and treatment. Yes, this is treatment, just living outdoors. This is prevention and cure. This one is particularly interesting. 1918, Camp Brooks Emergency Open Air Hospital in Boston. Influenza treated with sunlight and fresh air. Boston is Massachusetts in the United States. The Surgeon General of the Massachusetts State Guard, William A. Brooks, held that patients did not do as well in an ordinary hospital, no matter how well ventilated, as they did outdoors. In other words, it's not just fresh air, it's sunlight too. And other properties, probably grounding as well. All right, continuing. Patients in indoor sun parlors were not exposed to direct sunlight all day as they were when outdoors. He reported that in one general hospital with 76 cases, 20 patients died within 3 days, and 17 nurses fell ill. By contrast, according to one estimate, the regimen adapted at the outdoor camp just outside reduced the fatality of hospital cases from 40% to 13%. Brooks wrote that the efficacy of open air treatment has been absolutely proven, and one has only to try it to discover its value. I believe we're all going to be trying that sooner or later. This is a quote from Ellen White. The effects produced by living in close, ill-ventilated rooms are these. The system becomes weak and unhealthy. The circulation is depressed. The blood moves sluggishly through the system because it is not purified and vitalized by the pure, invigorating, electrified air of heaven. She uses the word electrified in other places. The mind becomes depressed and gloomy while the whole system is enervated. Enervated means weakened and low energy. And fevers and other acute diseases are liable to be generated. Your careful exclusion of external air and fear of free ventilation leave you to breathe the corrupt, unwholesome air which is exhaled from the lungs of those staying in these rooms, and which is poisonous, unfit for the support of life. The body becomes relaxed, the skin becomes sallow, digestion is retarded, and the system is peculiarly sensitive to the influence of cold. Even a slight exposure produces serious diseases in you. Number 13, trench warfare during the World War I. Soldiers remained healthy even when chilled. Here's one of the stories. When I was in Paris before the war, wrote a French soldier, I never passed a winter without coughs and colds and rheumatics. Here in the trenches, I never have a thing the matter with me. And we're all like that. At the medical inspection the other day, out of 400 men, there was only one man who had anything the matter with him, and he just had a cut finger. We were on an exposed slope, bare and cheerless, with mud in generous quantities and a chill penetrating wind accentuating the discomfort. But no one except myself seemed to mind it. Number 14. In 1914, 1915, Canadian troops were camped in tents on Salisbury Plain under extreme conditions of wet and discomfort, but with excellent health. As soon as they were moved into huts, catarrhs and sore throats spread rapidly, and several cases of cerebrospinal fluid occurred. Number 15, nurses get more colds than their open air patients. Isn't that interesting? Let's see what she says. Nurses who shut themselves up for the evening are more affected by colds than their patients who live in open air shelters at sanatoria. Now, the next story is very practical. It's the story of an open air TB sanitarium. This open air medical encampment should, I believe, make a comeback. And it may be us who bring it back as the world spins out of control. I include this one because it's more detailed. It gives ideas, practical ideas of how it was used and what was used in it. Since 1905, that was about 5 years previous to this writing, consumptive, insane patients have been separated and treated to their own great advantage, and incidentally to that of their non-TB fellow inmates in canvas tents throughout the 4 seasons of the year at the Manhattan State Hospital, East New York City, USA. You're looking at an open-air sanitarium, a practical, working, open-air sanitarium. That's all there is to it, just a few tents. It was an experimental camp. It was established consisting of 2 large dormitory tents, 2 large tents, 20 by 40 feet, each containing 20 beds, with smaller tents of different shapes for the accommodation of the nurses. Tents for the nurses. The care of hospital stores, pantries, and a dining tent for such patients as were able to leave their beds and tents for their meals. All right, you catch what different types of tents held? All right. It was originally intended to continue the camp only through the summer. But when, in the autumn, it was found that the favorable experience continued, it was decided to carry the experiment on a modified scale into the approaching winter. The camp at first had been placed upon an elevated knoll, properly exposed to the full force of the summer breezes. For the winter, its site was removed to the center of the island, where hills and buildings acted as a windbreak. See, that's practical application there. The number of patients was reduced to 20. Those most ill being retained and the others being returned, much against their will, to the buildings. They liked it, they adapted, they acclimated, it felt wonderful. Yes, I mean, continuing. In the accessory tents above mentioned, large stoves were built with wire screens surrounding them to protect the patients, and with asbestos and other fireproof material for the prevention of fire. Slatted wooden movable pathways were prepared, which might furnish means of passage between tents when the storms should come. Very practical. It was found that despite high wind and bad weather, a more even temperature had been maintained and less discomfort had been experienced in the tents than in the hospital wards. That's surprising. And then in the hospital wards, most exposed to the force of the gale. This tent camp, in which all TB patients with active manifestations are isolated, has remained in continual use through the succeeding winters and intervening seasons. This is the same one, just from a different angle. Among the results obtained are the reduction to a minimum of the danger of infection to other patients and to other employees. The patients themselves have suffered no injury or hardship, but have, on the contrary, been unmistakably benefited. Seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? There has been a decrease in the death rate, both absolute and relative death rate. A marked general increase in bodily weight, amounting in the case of one patient to an actual doubling of weight from 83 pounds to 160 pounds. And mental has, as a general rule, been associated with physical improvement among the patients in this camp. Common colds were here unknown during the winters. Dr. McDonald makes the observation that where TB and insanity coexist, they are apt to alternate as to the prominence of several manifestations, the mental symptoms being more pronounced, while the physical symptoms are in temporary disuse, and vice versa. In other words, when the body is in disuse, the insanity symptoms worsen. When the mental powers are in disuse, the physical symptoms worsen. And Ellen White made very similar statements to that. Under the tent treatment, he has found a general disposition toward accord in the manifest improvement in both respects, proceeding concurrently, and some of the discharges from the hospital, which gave most satisfaction at the time and most assurance for the patient's future, were of inmates of the tuberculosis camp. Yeah, we're actually I'm in discussion with another organization about the possibility of creating such a health encampment, starting out very small in a certain part of the United States. So far, it's just in the talking phases, but it's kind of serious talking. All right, this is from the Health Reformer, April 1, 1872, paragraph 7. Exercise in the open air, even in winter, is necessary for the healthful circulation of the blood. The pure, invigorating air of heaven is God's free gift to men and women. And it is impossible for them to be cheerful, healthful, and happy unless they appreciate these rich bounties and allow them to answer the purpose for which they were designed. Authorities of every kind have finally agreed that the outdoor treatment is the only reliable treatment for the Great White Plague. The same treatment can be given one who is suffering from weak lungs merely and is desirous of strengthening these important organs. Now, the next few slides are from The Cold Air Cure from the magazine Good Health, December 1928, by Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. Actually, they're quoting Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. All right. Cold air is a friend, not an enemy. A powerful healing agent, not a cause of disease. It is the avoidance of cold air that causes disease, not its presence. Now, how many doctors have ever told you such a thing? It's time we start getting back to the counsels that God has given us, yes? Here's Dr. Kellogg talking. Cold, fresh air has special value, says Dr. Kellogg. in good health because it stimulates the organs and all the functions of the body. Did you know that? I didn't know that. It quickens the heart to the greatest activity, increases the number of red corpuscles in the blood. Cold air also contains more oxygen to the cubic inch than does warm air. For instance, in 6 breaths of cold air, 30 degrees, one gets as much oxygen as he would in 7 breaths of warm air, 100 degrees. This principle would explain why it is so much harder to breathe in saunas that rely on a closed cabinet and heated air, 130 to 140 degrees. That closed cabinet of necessity also means rebreathing one's own impure exhaled air, plus the toxic vapors from your perspiring body. All right, back to the article. Hence, the body takes in 1/7 more oxygen in cold weather than in warm weather. This increased amount of oxygen is a matter of great consequence. This is why one feels better in cold than in warm air. A brisk walk on a cold, crisp winter morning creates a splendid appetite for breakfast. That's because of increased metabolism. For the same reason that the fire burns brighter on a cold winter night. When the fire burns with a particular bright glow, people are wont to say, winter is coming. See how bright the fire burns? The fire burns brighter and faster because it has 1/7 more oxygen. That was from the Journal of Outdoor Life, Volume 2, July 1905, number 6, page 151. The title was Summer and Winter Air. That was from they were quoting Dr. Kellogg. All right, number 17. This is the Kimball House, the first open-air school in Battle Creek. And there were many such schools around the world, and they made a significant enhancement in children's health. What you're looking at is Eleanor and Virginia Kimball. These 2 sisters were the first 2 students at the first open-air school in Battle Creek, Michigan. Their father started it in 1915 with Dr. Kellogg and another doctor. The doctors at Battle Creek wanted to make sick children well, and well children stronger to prevent TB and other infectious disease. And they did indeed make sick children well and well children stronger. Originally, 125 children from around the city were identified as potentially benefiting from the open-air school. Mainly children recuperating from illness or those from poor families. Excuse me. These were invited. But on the first day of school, not one child showed up. What a conundrum. So the children of the doctors were drafted to attend the school, including these 2 adorable little girls. Eventually, all 5 Kimball children attended this open-air school. The daily routine of a hot, healthy lunch, rest periods, fresh, invigorating cold air, and lots of individual attention was proved very beneficial. And the town, they took notice. Soon, other students joined them. I'm going to pause just for a moment. There's an application to this, isn't there? When the COVID pandemic showed up, this is what they should have done. And if there are groups that are awake and paying attention, this may be the alternative when it comes back around. And it is coming back around. And it gets worse and worse and worse. Oh, yeah. And I'm going to want your comments on this at the end of this presentation, too. So, and your questions. Get ready for those, too. All right. Now, according to the Battle Creek Inquirer, that's a newspaper, February 20, 1916, the tide of sentiment turned so suddenly and completely in its favor that those at the head of this schoolwork are overwhelmed with demands and entreaties of parents who want their children given such health-giving opportunities. Watch what this would do if the next pandemics, if someone did this. The contrast will vindicate God, and it will be wonderful. All right, continuing. The title of that article was Open Air School Becomes Very Popular Here and Provision Must Be Made to Extend System. The windows were kept open, even in the coldest weather. A stove near the teacher's platform and radiators around the room kept the room temperature near 60 degrees. And it's not just temperature, it's fresh, continuously fresh air for the lungs, warmth for the rest of the body. Students dressed in special hooded uniforms made from Hudson Bay wool blankets. They wore gloves and felt boots, which reached up to their knees. Their bulky uniform was worn over their regular school clothes. This was another option for keeping warm in open-air schools. Hooded wool onesie undergarments. Very delightful. All right, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg donated the milk from the sanitarium farms and a sun lamp for the students who took light treatments for 20 minutes each day. The school nurse made regular visits, and when the children were sufficiently improved, they returned to regular classrooms. All right, next story, number 18. This one, you will be familiar with it. I used it in a couple or three times. It's a very popular story. It seems to fit everything. This is from the Detroit, Michigan Free Press, Sunday, July 22, 1906. Remarkable case of cure of consumption, or TB, by outdoor life. Battle Creek doctor given up as beyond saving, catch that, beyond saving by mainstream doctors 5 years ago, is now strong as an ox, never feels effect of heat or cold. We keep seeing that in these stories. They acclimate to temperature changes. One of the most marvelous cases on record of complete cure of pulmonary consumption simply by outdoor life and fresh air is that of Dr. Herbert Osig of this city. That was the picture, by the way, from the newspaper articles. It's best we could find. 5 years ago, it was announced to him that he had tuberculosis and was beyond recovery. He decided, however, that he would not die. And yes, that's a factor in health, a decision. Since that time, he has lived in a tent, summer and winter, and is now cured by the strenuous treatment which he has subjected himself to. He has a tent, 12 by 14 feet, in the grove at the home of Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. That is his home. He owned the whole block. It is a framework of wood covered with a wire netting with a screen door for an entrance. There is a canvas top and a fly. There are canvas slides and ends to the tent, which roll up, but are never lowered except during a rain or snowstorm, and then once upon the side which the storm is approaching. By the way, remember that mansion there? There's like 40 rooms in there. Well, it relates because Dr. Kellogg sleeps in that treehouse that you see above the tent every night. That's where he sleeps. And the children, they sleep in these tents as well, in the tents. He gets the treehouse. Okay, sifted through the screen. All right, there is a wooden floor in this tent. The doctor sleeps all winter with the sides open and with no stove or fire. Often in the morning, his bed is covered with the snow sifted through the screen. In the summertime, when he comes to his tent in the evening, he puts on a light, open-breasted shirt and a thin pair of white trousers. He goes bareheaded and barefooted constantly, except when in the city on business. He never wears underclothing. July 1905, Good Health magazine. The outdoor gymnasium at Battle Creek Sanitarium is where patients went to get as much sun exposure as possible. Yes, that's the picture you're looking at there. Sunlight was officially considered the most effective of all their treatment modalities. And they had a lot of modalities, so that is saying a lot. At night, Dr. Osa goes to bed stark naked. About 10 o'clock, he pulls a blanket over him. And sometimes, about 1 o'clock, he covers himself with a second blanket. He never feels in the least the effects of heat or cold. In the morning, he takes a 10-mile run and then a bath. Twice a day, he again takes runs of 2 miles each. Frequently, he walks to Kalamazoo and back, a distance of 50 miles. They never said he did that in the same day. His health is now perfect. His muscles like iron, and he is an athlete. He is visited by hundreds of patients from the sanitarium. The professors at Yale College have extended to him an invitation to visit that institution in September, and he has accepted. Well, let's talk about that for a moment. What if, I love the what ifs. What if hundreds of people visited us for curing all manner of disease, even cancer, by a simple outdoor lifestyle? An outdoor lifestyle that we model for them, like we used to at the Battle Creek Sanitarium, but more still. If we want to be noticed, we must do something notable. If we want to vindicate God's healing agencies, let's vindicate them big, big. If nature does the healing, God gets the credit. That's what we want. We want to glorify God. We don't glorify God in our hospitals. I see these very sorts of health recovery encampments as a soon-to-be necessity. All right, continuing on with that article. Dr. Osig never uses meat or vegetables, salt, pepper, or other condiments, but lives entirely upon fruit and nuts. And we're not going to talk about that limitation of his diet. That's another whole story, and I'm not getting into it. There are several other persons living in tents near the doctor, among them being George H. Allen, the champion pedestrian of Great Britain. Pedestrian in this sense means a competitive speed walker who recently arrived in this country. This guy did. Okay. Allen is shown here with Dr. Osig in the picture here with. Osig is holding a fawn. There being 19 deer and fawns in the park in which the doctor is tenting. Doctor is tenting in Dr. Kellogg's property, which is as large as a block, and there's a deer park on his property. Now, did you notice that the outdoor cure didn't just cure him of TB, it made him a robust, powerful athlete, acclimated to all weather conditions, resistant to disease and cold within a year or two. He was far healthier after the outdoor cure than before he even got sick. Remember now, doctors pronounced him as beyond saving, as they pronounced to millions upon millions around this globe. You are beyond saving. You're going to die in such and such a date. You must manage your symptoms with drugs, but we will not cure you with our drugs. We'll just manage you. Well, that was frustration on my part. You will note that the world was clamoring for his story. It's what happens when we live those advanced principles of health reform. All infectious patients at the Battle Creek Sanitarium were assigned to live in open air tent colonies outside, even in the winter. They were not even allowed to stay inside the sanitarium building. Now, here is what this is an intriguing statement. Here's what Dr. Kellogg said about those patients in open air tents in the wintertime. This is pivotal. Sanitarium patients, although struggling with such formidable maladies as lung and bone tuberculosis, thrive best, make the surest and most rapid progress toward recovery in the winter months. Now, that was not expected. How is that kind of rapid healing possible without sunlight? I thought sunlight was the primary healing agent of sunlight, of nature. And yet, cold air was more effective than even sunlight. Unbelievable. All my life, I have been perplexed as to why God shuts off nature's healing agencies in the wintertime. Why would he do that? But now, finally, there's an answer. God did not shut off nature's healing agencies in the winter. He just activates different healing agencies in the wintertime. Cold, fresh, electrified, invigorating, healing air is a major healing modality. Okay, God told us right after Adam and Eve fell that he would curse the earth for man's sake. For man's sake? You make a curse for man's sake? Interesting. The curses that God placed upon the earth caused the freezing winters for man's sake. The very cold itself was for our sake, for our healing. It may not actually be so much a lack of sunlight that's making people sick in the winter, but rather a chronic lack of fresh, electrifying air, especially cold air. And that means that there is no cold and flu season. It's the seal ourselves up indoors season, which means we need to allow our sleeping quarters to be filled with cold, fresh, circulating, electrifying, invigorating, healing air every night as our body is kept warm under the blankets. This means that for optimal health, we can at least sleep with windows open in our homes if we're not sleeping outside in a tent or a treehouse. Number 19, this small little paragraph. This is Ellen White speaking. She says, I shall have more to say about these matters later, but I wish now to say that all patients should keep out of doors as much as possible, and many will be benefited by sleeping in the open air. My lady workers have slept out on the veranda all winter and have been free from coughs and colds. It's such a simple thing, isn't it? It costs nothing. It boosts our immune system and restores our health. And now the next slides, one last here. The next slide will be referring to TB patients in the Swiss Alps and the magnificent health produced by practicing the outdoor life. This is the last story. Ready? The air, notice that's in red, the air and the sun bath is the most powerful of all tonics and health restorers. It rebuilds the organism and increases its vitality. Children strengthened during the summer months by air and sun baths are hardier and can much better withstand all the illnesses that may affect them during the winter. Same applies to adults. So we must resist the temptation to dismiss the power of an air bath all by itself. That doesn't do anything. Benjamin Franklin took a naked air bath every morning. It's not just about sunlight. Moving air, impacting the body, is a healing tonic. God intended it to be so, just like sunlight, just like walking barefoot on the grass, just like diving into a cool, pure mountain stream. These are all healing. Talk about a healthcare system. There's nothing like God's outdoor healthcare system. Continuing on with that article. In fact, the general health of Dr. Rollier's patients proved quite remarkable. Visitors often commented on the lack of coughs and colds among children who were so exposed. The fresh, cool air doesn't just work upon the lungs for our health. Taking an air bath on the naked skin is a magnificent tonic and should be taken as often as possible. Even tanning indoors with a tanning bed is not nearly as effective for your health as when it is combined with a wide open window and a solid fan blowing upon the naked body. That was the experience of the pioneer practitioners of sunlight and open air. The patients at Layson also continued to improve in the outdoors, even in the wintertime, even though vitamin D production was allegedly absent. Was this because they had stored vitamin D up during the warmer seasons? Why they kept improving, or something else? Was there still healing energy in the winter sunlight, like infrared? Was it the cold itself that increased metabolism, which sped up healing? Was it the tonic effect of simply cold? Was it the higher concentration of oxygen in cold air, which causes the fires of life to burn brighter? We have been told all our lives that cold air is to be avoided, that sunlight is to be feared, for it causes disease and death, that we must have drugs to manage our ever-increasing chronic ills, that there is no better way, and that there never was a better way. Well, folks, it's time to stop listening to even the philosophies of the merchants of pharmakeia and to start implementing God's magnificent outdoor healing agencies. What a treasure trove of healing power. So here's a reasonable question. How is this possible in the wintertime? Well, here's why what you are looking at worked in Layson, Switzerland. Layson, right there in that part, was known to be a place that was almost devoid of wind or breezes. These children were not chilled. The sun was on them, even though it was very cold outside. These children could not do what they are doing here in the winter, had there been a cold winter breeze. The sunlight and lack of wind enabled this type of therapy. This cannot be done just anywhere. And they acclimated to this over time and became hardened to changes in temperature and diseases. The circulation became balanced and normalized because the skin circulation was dramatically improved with the tanning and exercise during the summer. Just a moment here. Yeah, but some have asked, well, didn't Ellen White tell us that we must cover our limbs for our health? Well, yes, she did. And she talked a lot about it, and that's important. But she also said this following statement, allowing for the possibility of acclimation. Here's that quote. Boys accustomed to exercise out of doors become inured or hardened to cold and exposure. They are actually less liable to colds when thinly clad than the girls, because the open air seems to be their natural estate. And that's just a choice. Delicate girls accustom themselves to live indoors, a choice, and in a heated atmosphere. And yet they go from the heated room out of doors with their limbs and feet seldom better protected from the cold than while remaining in a close, warm room. The air soon chills their limbs and feet and prepares the way for disease. And the sun cure pioneers proved that God has made it possible through a tan and through acclimation to meaningfully increase the vascularity of the skin of the body, which can help acclimate the body to cold, the same way the face can through its increased vascularity. And more balance, more or less balance the circulation in the body. Yes, it's possible. Now, the next and final slide in this presentation is my favorite quote from one of the pioneer practitioners of the sun cure movement. Here it is. Regarding the newcomers at an English alpine sanatorium, it is noticeable how quickly they respond to the climatic conditions. And in just 2 or 3 weeks, look and feel in better health. The writer discussing the climate with 4 men, all cases of arrested disease, TB, able to engage in vigorous outdoor sports and looking strong and healthy, found that they agreed that they had never known what it was to be really well and feel the full joy of living till they were impelled by tuberculosis to practice the outdoor life, the Eden way of life. We have been missing out on such pleasure and health. It is time to move back to nature where we belong. The current events are telling us that this is what's needed. We need to live close to the earth, to live in harmony with nature, where we were designed by God to live. God will have his way in this our testing time, as the world spins out of control. One way or the other, God's people will return to nature, and his health care will be vindicated. God will be glorified by a people obedient to his natural law. And it's the only way we will survive what's already coming for us, folks. That is the end of that presentation. Thank you. Let me shut this off and we'll have our conversation here.
Thank you, John. Wow. Are you now looking forward for winter to come?
Not yet. I don't have a tent yet. So, but we're working on that. I'm every day looking online for a tent that's affordable, that fits my needs. So we'll see.
And then I want to ask Jan. Jan is in Africa in the summer, and then he comes back in the winter for some reason. And if I remember right, Jan, you said, "Oh, I don't like to come back to the winter." Are you maybe changed your mind now?
Well, I was just 2 months in Zambia, so it was not planning to come back for the winter, but yes, I changed my mind now. It's a good idea with this winter. But I want to ask you another thing, Brother John. Could you put up the slide 11, the second part of slide 11 one more time, because I like to make a screenshot of that one.
Okay, slide 11.
Yes, the second part of it.
Second part of slide 11. Describe it, by the way. That might help me find it.
That was something with that, like the people outside, they had like a much better, they were not sick and so on. You know, it was just something that shot a complete big hole in the whole Corona narrative.
Okay, let me look at that. Let me see if I pull it back up again.
And I didn't know about. I always thought that yes, Ellen White said we had to put much clothes on in the cold and so on. And I had no idea that this cold air has such a good
Healing properties.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I'm gonna get used to that now as well.
The efficacy of
yes, that's the one. That's the one. Exactly. Yep. Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. You got your screenshot yet?
Yes, thanks. I'm good with it now.
Okay, are there any other slides by anyone else there that wants to see a particular slide while I have it up?
John, I was thinking about these people, sick people laying in the beds. They were probably grounded at the same time, right?
I don't know. They might have had straw. It would be natural fibers, right? During that time, 1918. Probably wooden cots. Yes, it looks like wooden cots. Right there. You see that right there? It looks like wooden legs. So I'm not sure, but they would be in bare feet likely. They'd have to step on the ground sometime.
Right.
They would certainly have better chance of being grounded here than indoors. No chance indoors.
Remember the first health center I was working at, that was in Denmark. And for those who know the place, it's called Humlegården. And there, some of the patients, they were living in huts. You know, it was walls on 3 sides, and then just a curtain on the 4th side. So they were actually treating cancer with that outdoor life and just raw food.
Wait a minute, where is this? Where is this, and when?
That was in Denmark. It was a Dr. Nolfi.
What year?
Oh boy.
Decade?
Yeah, maybe 40s or something, like 40s or 50s.
1940s?
Yeah, 1950. So she worked like a natural doctor. I mean, not that natural doctor, like doctors usually work. And then she got breast cancer. And then she knew that she didn't want to have that treatments which people were getting. So she found out that no, she wanted to just eat raw food, get exercise, you know, these 8 natural remedies. And the interesting thing, she was not an Adventist, but up until when I was there was always working an Adventist there. So that was the kind of interesting. So, and I also, if I remember right, working at Wildwood, the rooms there had this open, I mean, it was on the veranda. You could open the doors completely so that they were laying half outside, if I remember right. So
well, it should be.
They probably had that principle at Wildwood too. So, you know, in the winter, people are telling me, you know, Eva, I'm keeping 18 degrees in my rooms.
18 as in 1-8?
Yes, because someone told me, I don't know if I read it myself, I don't remember, but they were saying that Sister Wise says that was a good temperature to have inside. That is Celsius. So,
Celsius, oh, that would explain it. Celsius. In Fahrenheit, she said 65. And I have a quote at the end of this presentation, I believe, something I took out because it was too long, where she said 65 degrees. Your mercury should not exceed 65 degrees.
Okay, so I don't know what that is in Celsius, but you know,
65 is beginning to be comfortable.
Right. So are you saying that if we get a cold, we should actually not stay in bed, we should go outside?
Yes, because colds have nothing to do with cold. Colds, as we've seen in the pattern of this whole presentation, colds are prevented by cold air. We seal ourselves up to hide the cold air and we get colds. I'm pretty sure the medical community long ago misnamed colds intentionally.
And
I'm pretty skeptical now, you know.
Right. I have started to take cold showers. I just did go in and take the cold shower, and it feels good. It's very cold when you start. So I just take the warm and cold once a week. Otherwise, I just take the cold shower. And it really, if you have some pain in the body, it just, relieve the pain.
The cold does?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I have not heard that before. Oh, very fascinating. I think we can have a whole presentation just on cold showers and cold baths and etc.
Right. Jan, your hand is up.
Yeah, Eva, I just wanted to answer your question about the 65 degrees Fahrenheit. They equal 18.3 degrees Celsius. So that's that's a bullseye. And while we're talking about cancer, there's this sad news. I think we'll be hearing more, those of us who go to the SDP soon later. Brother Omondi passed away this morning.
Oh, no.
And supposedly it was a brain tumor on the brainstem. Yeah.
Wow.
We were very late informed about the whole situation, so I don't know. It was difficult. Yeah.
Well, that was
I think
sad news.
Yeah, I think Brother Andy will talk a bit more about this now in the following Zoom on Seventh Day Press.
Yeah, they are with us actually. Hello, Whitehurst family.
Hello.
Hi. Well, nice to have you with us.
Yes, thank you.
So, any thoughts or questions to John from you?
No, not from me in particular. I didn't get in until late, so I got in right as he was ending his presentation.
Oh, you missed a good one. I'm just saying.
They're all good.
Hey, I actually talked about you without saying your name.
Uh-oh, I hope it was good.
Oh, I hope so too.
I think I know what it was. Was it when you showed these tents?
It had to do with tents and an open air sanitarium and an open air facility and a health encampment. Does that sound familiar, Andy?
Very much, actually. Yes.
Yeah, I guess that my mind was going to you guys when you share with us. Yeah. So back to the TB. Why is there less TB now when people are living inside, indoors? Much more than, our house is just much more tight now than before.
That's a question to me or anyone?
To you.
Oh, it's because we have health laws and health regulations. Sanitation is taken care of now. We have refrigeration. The great health reform movement happened, taught a lot of people a lot of things. Ventilation's better. It was the things like that. But TB is still active around the world, but just not so much here.
So
anymore.
Less TB and more cancer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we have 1,000 different ways to cause cancer.
Right. So, yeah, John, thank you so much. We are looking forward to the next program with you. And maybe, Jan, can I ask you to maybe have the closing prayer with us, please?
Let's kneel for closing prayer where possible. Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you and praise you for this wonderful Sabbath day. Thank you for the opportunities you've given us to enjoy your creation and to even to fellowship around the globe through this technique, through the internet, and through the things you provided for us. Please help us that we can use this information, implement it in our lives, and be a witness to all the people we meet in our daily lives, to our families, to our friends, and to our workmates. Thank you for John Everblest, and I ask you that you will continue to protect him and lead his ministry to your glory and honor. Pray and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.